Good morning. It's Friday, July 18th. The multi-front war in the Middle East is now 651 days old. I'm your host, Jonathan Schanzer. Welcome back yet again to the FDD Morning Brief. Some big drama surrounding the accidental shelling of Gaza Strip's only Catholic church. Israel's enemies are blaming the IDF for deliberately targeting the Holy Family Church, as it's known. The Israelis say that it was completely accidental. The incident sadly left 3 dead, and Israel is now up against a torrent of criticism in the international media. All of this comes as Israel is getting knocked around in the court of public opinion for continuing to fight against Hamas in Gaza. From Israel's perspective, though, there is very little choice. The hostages are still in Hamas captivity, 20 live, 30 dead. And Hamas is still in power, so Israel continues to fight. These are legitimate war aims, and they've yet to be achieved. In the meantime, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly speaking with the Pope this morning, trying to soothe those tensions. Our guest today is Hillel Neuer, Executive Director of UN Watch. Hillel is now a repeat offender on this show, and his organization keeps close tabs on the biggest international grift in modern history. Yes, I'm referring to the United Nations. Hillel and I caught up yesterday to talk about the U.S. sanctions on UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese, the sad clown, and other signs of pervasive rot inside this sprawling and irredeemably corrupt organization. Stay tuned for that conversation coming your way faster than the UN passes resolutions vilifying Israel. Okay, actually, maybe not that fast, but still, stay tuned. Someone needs to tell me what on God's green earth Israel is doing in southern Syria, because I definitely couldn't tell you. 1 minute, the Israelis are on the 5-yard line of a normalization deal with Syria. The next, Israel is bombing the bejesus out of Syria. Don't get me wrong, I see some of the logic. The Middle East is a brutal place. The Israelis don't want their jihadi neighbors in Syria to get away with war crimes against minorities, because what starts with the Druze ends with the Jews. I think that's probably safe to say. Then there's the alliance factor. The Israelis are cultivating the Druze in Syria as allies, and it seems to be working. The Druze have, in some ways, given Israel a seat at the table in Damascus. So now Israel is defending its allies and doing so admirably. That said, the rule of holes applies right now. When you're in a hole, stop digging. And right now, Israel is in a serious hole. Because of the war in Gaza, Israel is taking a beating every single day in the international media. After more than 600 days of war, do the Israelis really need to pick another fight when core national interests are not imperiled? I mean, get the hostages home and end the war in Gaza. That's what more than 2/3 of Israel wants, right? I don't have all the answers, folks, but I am truly and generally confused. And at this phase in the war, I think Israel's supporters are justified in asking for just a little clarity. Now for your headlines. Headline 1, Israel launched a national awareness campaign warning Israelis of Iranian recruitment attempts. Since October 7th, Israeli authorities have arrested dozens of Israeli citizens suspected of spying for the Islamic Republic. We're talking about upwards of 35 indictments in just the last year alone. Just yesterday, an IDF soldier was arrested for providing intel to Iranian agents. So now Israel's National Public Diplomacy Directorate and the Shin Bet have launched a campaign called Easy Money, Heavy Price to raise awareness about Iranian recruitment efforts. As the name suggests, many of those wannabe spies are motivated by financial gain. Iranian handlers offer quick money, which is often transferred through cryptocurrency, so the whole exchange remains anonymous. But what the Israeli public needs to understand is that this is treason, so the consequences are steep. The Israeli campaign, which will run on radio, the web, social media, is warning Israelis that they face up to 15 years in prison for supporting the enemy in Tehran. Headline 2, the Yemeni National Resistance Forces intercepted a shipment of Iranian weapons. The shipment was bound for the Houthis, and the National Resistance Forces, or NRF as they are known, are U.S. partners who back the internationally recognized Yemeni government, in other words, the not Houthis. The NRF seized over 750 tons of munitions and hardware. That's a lot. And that includes hundreds of advanced missiles, drones, radar systems, and air defense equipment. They also found manuals written in, wait for it, Farsi. Many of the system seized were manufactured by a sanctioned company affiliated with Iran's Ministry of Defense. For a sneak peek at these weapons, check out the U.S. Central Command's X account. According to CENTCOM, this was the largest seizure of advanced conventional Iranian weapons in the NRF's history. Congratulations to our Yemeni partners. Keep it coming, fellas. Headline 3, President Trump met with Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed bin Abdulrahman al-Thani at the White House on Wednesday. I guess Wednesday is terror funding dirtbag day at 1600 Pennsylvania. Truly amazing this guy has access to the White House when his government consistently funds terrorists. Anywho, Trump and al-Thani spoke about a ceasefire in Gaza. Apparently, Qatari, Egyptian, and American mediators presented Israel and Hamas with a new Gaza ceasefire proposal. The deal currently on the table involves a 60-day ceasefire, during which Hamas would release 10 living hostages and 18 bodies in exchange for the release of Palestinian prisoners and more humanitarian aid for Gaza. It's remarkable that we're still talking about a partial hostage deal after 651 days of war. Truly insane that the world is still playing by Hamas and Qatar rules. The good news, if we're going to call it that, is over the past 10 days, the gaps between Israel and Hamas have reportedly narrowed on a deal. The new ceasefire proposal includes adjustments to the scale of Israel's withdrawal from Gaza and the number of Palestinian prisoners that would be released per Israeli hostage. Al-Thani is expected to meet with Hamas leaders in Doha tomorrow, which, by the way, is where those leaders live thanks to Qatari hospitality. And that makes Qatar a flawed negotiating partner and a state sponsor of terrorism. I hope Trump gets tough with the Qataris at some point, because otherwise they're going to continue to tip the scales in favor of their terrorist clients, and on it will go. All right. Now it's time to press play on that pre-recorded conversation with Hillel Neuer of UN Watch. He's a super smart guy with lots of interesting nuggets to share. Have a listen. Welcome to the program, Hillel Neuer.
Thank you.
Well, great to have you with us. There's a lot to unpack right now as it relates to the United Nations. So let's start with the sanctions dropped by the Trump administration on Francesca Albanese. What does this mean? What's the impact? Why is this important?
Well, it's historic. We've never seen this before. Certainly a Western country has never imposed official sanctions on a UN official, as far as I can recall. And this was a bold and necessary step. Look, Francesca Albanese is not the usual UN official. There are many problematic UN officials, but she's in a league of her own. This is someone, to remind the viewers, who has said that America is subjugated by the Jewish lobby. So not 21st century anti-Zionism as anti-Semitism, but more 1930s anti-Semitism. She told the BBC, you have the Israel lobby in your veins. She has routinely compared the state of Israel and its leaders to the Third Reich. So she also hates America. She says America is founded upon genocide. She says Trump, like Winston Churchill, are white supremacists. So she's a radical, extreme left-wing ideologue who comes from Italy. She studied at SOAS, which is a radical school in London. And she says strange things. She has said that she said the CIA and the Mossad carried out the Paris attacks of 2015, which of course was an ISIS terrorist attack that massacred journalists at a magazine called Charlie Hebdo, who had satirized religion, all religions, including at the time radical Islam. So she said the CIA and the Mossad carried out the attack. So she's a dangerous nutcase. And, the UN complained when Secretary Rubio announced the sanctions, said, well, countries should engage with the UN. Guess what? America and others engaged about her. They complained about her. Guterres received numerous complaints from the United States. He did nothing. They wrote letters to him this year. Both administrations had approached him. He did nothing. So, when she was up for a reappointment in April, The U.S. government opposed it. The House Foreign Affairs Committee, Brian Mast, sent in a detailed objection. The Human Rights Council threw the objections in the garbage. So really, there was left with no choice. This is someone who, her latest move was to call, I was there in Geneva at the Human Rights Council, when she issued a call to sanction U.S. companies, Google, Amazon, BlackRock, just all kinds of U.S. companies that have any connection with the state of Israel. And Secretary Rubio said, that's it, you're sanctioned. And I think it was extraordinary poetic justice. Days after she called to sanction the U.S., now she's sanctioned, and those are real. She may have trouble accessing her bank accounts, her credit cards, traveling. She's not going to be able to spread her poison anymore on the campuses of Georgetown, Princeton, Harvard, Columbia University's Barnard College, all of which last year invited her, not just the students, the schools themselves had invited her. That's over, no more.
Then that's, I think, good news. And I do think, at least as I've heard from folks that I've talked to in the Trump administration, that it was in fact her move to start to try to sanction major U.S. corporations. That was the red line for Donald Trump. Don't mess with trade. I think that is the big message. She took her mandate, whatever that was, way too far. But now I got to ask you about the rest of the UN. Looks to be trembling and crumbling in the wake of this designation, these sanctions. We've heard about the Human Rights Council. Navi Pillay is, I guess, one of the big names. She resigned. There was another guy that resigned, and then one more after that. Is this like a domino effect that the Trump administration has triggered? What's going on here?
Yeah, Jonathan, I think you're right. The dominoes are falling. The sanctions hit the UN in a way that they never expected it. Navi Pillay, who is an infamous UN chairperson of a commission of inquiry. I say infamous because she also hates America and hates Israel, and she was named absurdly in July 2021 to be the head of an inquiry on Israel after she had publicly lobbied governments to, quote, sanction apartheid Israel. She had written a letter to President Biden to blame Israel for its war of May 2021 with Hamas. And then she was named to head an inquiry that was going to look at that war, among other things. So it's really, Alice in Wonderland kind of kangaroo courts at the UN Human Rights Council. And just to add in how absurd it is, she was appointed by the president of the Human Rights Council in July 2021, appointed Navi Pillay. That person, her name is Najat Shamim Khan, then went to The Hague and was elected as deputy prosecutor in The Hague. Navi Pillay and her two colleagues, Chris Sidoti and Milun Qatari, went to The Hague to meet with Deputy Prosecutor Najat Shamim Khan after she was the one who had appointed them. So it's such a sort of incestuous conflicts of interests that just keep adding up. The point is, Navi Pillay got scared. According to news reports, she has family members living in New York, and she was afraid she would not be able to see them again. And because the sanctions, they came under an executive order signed by President Trump in February, saying that anyone who cooperates with the International Criminal Court and going after American or Israeli officials can get sanctioned. And of course, as I just indicated, she went to The Hague to meet with the deputy prosecutor who had appointed her to hand them information to go after America and Israel. And then she got afraid about being sanctioned. According to reports, she cited other grounds. She cited age and health and other weighty commitments, but the timing, says it all. And then the other two followed as well, each perhaps for their own reasons. But no, it seems to me very clear, and that's what I was told by insiders, is that Navi Pillay certainly was frightened of U.S. sanctions. So that's another win when it comes to fighting UN abusers, because that's who these people are.
Yeah, it looks like sanctions actually work here. I mean, for all the people that say that we over-sanction, that we wield that power too much, it actually looks like this is having a direct and immediate impact on the UN, and I think that's laudable. I want to pivot for a second. We had recently Reverend Johnny Moore, the chairman of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, come on. There's an obvious UN angle to what's going on here. GHF has come in and they've tried to supplant the traditional aid mechanisms that have been dominated by the UN that have really served to support Hamas. to actually undergird Hamas in many ways inside the Gaza Strip. From your vantage point, as you watch this from Geneva, as you watch it from Turtle Bay, what's going on here? I mean, do you think that the UN is ultimately going to be undermined by this private sector initiative? Is the battle still kind of being fought to a tie? How do you view the impact of GHF right now?
Well, I certainly hope that GHF does manage to undermine this toxic monopoly that basically UNRWA and Hamas have had on the population in Gaza. Let's keep in mind that UNRWA, however it began and whatever its origins were, in the past 20 years, certainly when Hamas took over the Gaza Strip, UNRWA became completely infested with Hamas. Our upcoming report coming out of UN Watch, it should be out in September of 2025, will document how the entire school system in Gaza and in Lebanon were infested with Hamas. And I'll just throw out two names that are well known to experts on this issue, but not to regular folks. One is in Gaza, Su'ail al-Hindi. He was a teacher, a school principal, working for UNRWA in Gaza, also an elected member of the Hamas political bureau in Gaza, a 20-member bureau. He's one of about at least 10 of them have been eliminated, and he's one of the few that remain. He actually seems to have gone in hiding, hasn't posted anything for several months. He used to be posting a lot. He's based now in Turkey, but he was also the head of the UNRWA union, different unions, but at one point he was head of the entire UNRWA regional union system, which is 30,000 employees. So I'll say that again, an elected Hamas Politburo member, pictures of him arm in arm with Yahya Sinwar, was head of 30,000 UNRWA employees, and also at one point head of the UNRWA teachers union. And he was forced to leave eventually when his election became public. Initially, UNRWA spokesman at the time, Chris Gunnis, said, no, we asked him, and he said, everything's okay. He said, it's not true. So, we've done our due diligence, case closed. And then when Israel and others pushed back, they sort of let him go. And then he officially ended his connection to UNRWA. This is about 2017, but de facto, he maintained his connection to UNRWA, and he has very close ties with the people who succeeded him, and our report will document that. Same in Lebanon. The head of UNRWA in Lebanon was Fathi Sharif. The head of the teachers union was Fathi Sharif. Teacher, school principal, head of the teachers union. And when he was eliminated in about September or October of last year in 2024, Hamas issued an announcement that Israel had killed their leader, Hamas's leader in Lebanon. Whether he was the leader or a leader, not entirely clear. But we had already complained to the UN because for a decade on his Facebook page, every day, Fathi Sharif, UNRWA teacher, school principal, union leader, was posting pictures of Hamas leaders, posing in pictures with various terror chiefs, Hamas, the Jihad, even an Abu Qaeda affiliate. And he was doing it in plain sight. So when the head of UNRWA, Mr. Philippe Lazzarini, was challenged, he said, we don't know. We didn't know. How could we know? Or the UN spokesman in New York of the Secretary General said, well, how do we know? Terrorist leaders don't usually advertise it. He did. For 10 years, and every day on Facebook, he was posting pictures of him as basically some kind of Hamas leader. So to come back to your question, Hamas completely subverted UNRWA, and anything that reduces the monopoly that they have on giving out humanitarian aid, which really, they don't just give it out, they sell it. Hamas takes over the aid, they sell it, they use it to give aid to their fighters, and then the money is used to fuel their terrorism. And you saw how UNRWA freaked out in the past 2 months when this GHF, US-Israel-backed entity was giving out 70 million meals, not through UNRWA, not through Hamas. They freaked out, and the rhetoric was, I've never seen more wild rhetoric coming out of a UN agency saying, you're killing people, you're massacring people, when of course they don't mention that if it was in anyone's interests to have trouble at these distribution points, it was the interest of Hamas. So we'll leave it there.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's been wild to watch. Last question before I let you go, Hillel. We talk a lot about the need for reform. We talk about, all the problems with the UN. When you look around the Middle East right now in particular, is there any place where the UN has a positive role to play? I mean, we hear about possible normalization between Israel and Syria, and maybe the need to deploy some kind of multinational force on that southern border of Syria, the northeastern border of Israel, a buffer zone. The multinational forces in Egypt, are they playing a role? Or are we just looking at the need to just wholesale throw this thing out and start over? I think people still struggle with that, right? Trying to maintain some semblance of an international community. Is anything worth salvaging?
Well, that question has become certainly sharper in the past 2 years when the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has shown himself incapable of bringing some seriousness to the conversation. In the past, the Secretaries General, Ban Ki-moon, Kofi Annan from time to time, were able to push back against the alliance of dictatorships, 56 Islamic states who tried to dominate and subvert UN bodies. And sometimes you could have a meeting with Secretary General that was serious, and he would recognize that the particular UN resolution wasn't very helpful, and that in his own way, he could try to put in some balance. Guterres has done the opposite. Right from the beginning of the October 7th atrocities, he said Hamas didn't operate in a vacuum. He listed alleged grievances. And, every day, just yesterday, he issued a statement condemning Israel for bombing in Syria without mentioning the fact that there were massacres taking place by the Syrian regime. Ahmed Shara's Islamist gunmen were committing massacres. They were burning villages, allegedly raping, executing civilians, Druze, attacking the Druze, and Israel stopped the slaughter. And he said nothing about the Islamists and their slaughtering of the Druze. Instead, he only had words of condemnation for Israel. So, you ask, can the UN be a serious entity here? Less and less. However, there's no question that from time to time, if Israel and Syria, for example, reach some new understandings, or in Lebanon, you do want to have some kind of third party who can help manage the peace. But sadly, the UN really sapped our confidence. And to be fair, we say the UN, and that's legitimate. But of course, the individual troop contributing member states weren't very helpful. When I saw in 2006 that Italy and maybe France and some other European powers were going to be contributing thousands of troops, you said, okay, this is real. And then you saw very quickly that Hezbollah maybe picked off one or two of them early on, and very quickly the European countries realized they did not want to sacrifice a single one of their soldiers, and ended up playing some kind of a game where they looked the other way and let Hezbollah do whatever they wanted. So beyond the UN, of course, it's the member states themselves. So right now, the UN's not going away. There will be times when even Israel or America may want them, but I'd say this is a narrower set of options than we thought in the past.
Yeah, kind of grim stuff. Not really seeing a lot of hope there. No real glimmers for the UN, but we appreciate all the work that you're doing, Hillel, in holding their feet to the fire, speaking truth to power. I know you're alone out there in Geneva a lot in the wilderness, belly of the beast, as we say. I want to thank you, Hillel Neuer, for joining us today on the FDD Morning Brief.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to having a new U.S. ambassador, Mike Waltz. Hopefully he'll be confirmed soon, and we'll have a strong U.S. presence to push back against the dictatorships, and having groups like FDD who lead the fight for principles on the world stage. Look forward to working with you guys together.
Thanks a lot. Always good to talk to that guy. Here's what FDD has on tap for you today. My colleague Seth Frantzman has a sharp piece in the National Security Journal on Israel's latest strikes in Syria, meant to be a clear warning to the new regime there. Don't mess with the Druze. As noted earlier, tensions flared near Suwaida this week between Druze and Bedouin tribes. And when Syrian security forces stepped in, things quickly spiraled out of control. With Druze communities, including in Israel, deeply connected across borders, an attack on one hits them all. Will Syria's new strongman respond with a call for calm, or just enable more chaos? Time will tell. Meanwhile, in the national interest, FDD's David May reports that an ISIS-linked political party in South Africa has been barred from the ballot. The Islamic State of Africa, led by U.S.-designated terrorist Farhad Hummer, failed to meet basic registration standards like gathering enough signatures or even announcing its candidacy. Hummer, who's been arrested for illegal weapons and a deadly attack on a Shia mosque, now has 30 days to appeal. But his party's very existence is bizarre, and it should be a wake-up call for Pretoria to crack down on terrorists across the country. A guy can dream, but I guess I'm not going to hold my breath. Finally, in the Telegraph, my colleague Ivana Stradner breaks down how Russia is fueling chaos in Moldova, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Georgia, stirring unrest in places like Transnistria and spreading disinformation to paint NATO and the US as weak. Ivana's take: the UK and its allies need to push back hard and to prove the Kremlin wrong. Well, what's done is done, and we are most certainly done for today. I encourage you to check out the expert analysis on our website, FDD.org. Please do read our quick takes on X at FDD or watch the videos we post on Instagram and YouTube. And as always, you can make that all-important tax-deductible donation at FDD.org/invest. Tune in Monday for another episode of the FDD Morning Brief featuring Einat Wilf, a former Israeli Knesset member who is now an essential voice for sanity on Israel-related issues worldwide. So tune in for that. Until then, have a restful weekend. I'm Jonathan Schanzer signing off for FDD.